Hey, of course, nice, thank you. Very excited to be here. Hi, everyone. Side note before I get started, if you had asked me when I was younger, I played the drums growing up, and if you had told me that this is the stage I would be on as an adult, I would not have believed you. But in all seriousness, I'm very excited to be here. Let's just agree not to tell my high school self that this is how I'm on stage. And on a more serious note, before I get started, I do want to kind of note that, with the hurricanes that are going on, pretty serious time, especially for some communities that are nearby. So I threw up an easy to remember donate link for anyone that's interested in getting more information. But let's dive in. So I'm Cameron Johnbaz. I work in the ad tech organization at Yahoo. And I work in workflow and ease of use, which is a area that I'm obsessively passionate about. Eliminating user pain points in all areas of the DSP or our demand side platform is key to my role, especially those dealing with subpar workflows, performance issues, and errors. This is my first year at Pendomonium. I'm super excited to be here and to be sharing this with you all. I've learned so much from the sessions that I've been in so far, and I'm hoping that by the end of this session, you have even more ideas of how you can utilize Pendo to remove friction from your products, just like we did at Yahoo. This is a quick look at what we'll go over today. I'll go through a problem that we experienced at Yahoo, and then I'll also take you through what our product is. And then I'll take you through step by step how we utilized Pendo to understand more about that problem and ultimately get at our solutions faster. But before we dive into the technical details, I do have a story that I want to share with you all that I believe perfectly encapsulates the essence of what we'll go over today. Before joining Yahoo, I worked in systems implementation in warehouses across the country. And I want to take you back to a night I had in rural Indiana. After a particularly long and exhausting shift, I had gotten back to my hotel and I was very, very hungry. And there, like a beacon of light in the lobby, was a vending machine. And it promised to deliver the sweet, chocolatey goodness of Hostess donuts. Has everyone had donuts before or know what they are? All right, that's good. If you haven't, for some reason, just imagine little heavenly clouds of cronuts, I guess, is the new thing. Um, I was already picturing that first bite that I would take when I entered the code D6 into the machine and inserted my money. But instead of that satisfying sound of my snacks dropping down to the receptacle, I was met with silence. After more moments than I cared to admit counting, I realized that there was a little error message on the vending machine that said error E2. Frustrated and hungry, I did what any sane person might do in this situation, and I tried again and again and again, but still had no luck. By this point, my hunger was quickly turning into hanger, which is a dangerous state for anyone, especially in the middle of the night. So eventually I left and went to a nearby McDonald's. When I got back to the hotel, I stopped by the lobby and told the concierge about the error I had received. Their response, "Oh, that error message? That means that you need to use exact change." Exact change. Now, why couldn't the machine have just told me that? Now, I'm not telling you this story to try to recruit you to my end bad vending machine so I can get my snacks now crusade, but if anyone's interested in that, please see me after the session. But see, for me, it wasn't just the vending machine. It was my door keys never working the first time. It was that lingering smell in the curtains of my room. It was the missed wake-up calls. It was the sum of those experiences that led me to ultimately abandon that hotel. So what I've found is that great products can and do fail over time if we don't pay attention to them. And it's become a bit of my personal mission to ensure that they don't fail, which brings me to three key things that I try to remind myself often, and which are essentially the underpinnings of what we'll go over today. So errors are inevitable, but how we handle them matters greatly. Just like the vending machine's cryptic error message, unclear and unresolved errors can frustrate our users and drive them away from our products. Performance issues can take a simple task and turn it into a frustrating experience for users. The slow response of that vending machine mirrors how platform delays can annoy our users and erode their trust in our products. I never went back to that vending machine or to that hotel. As product managers, we don't always see these issues coming. Often, by the time we hear about them, they've already impacted our users. And that's where data and proactive monitoring come into play. Now, these points might seem obvious, but they're easy to overlook when you're caught up in the excitement of building and launching new products. But it's not all doom and gloom. There is hope. We found ourselves grappling with these issues at Yahoo, and I'm going to show you exactly how we tackled them with the help of Pendo. So let's take a step back and look at the problem that we experienced. About a year ago, we noticed a worrying trend. Our DSP UI satisfaction scores were going down, and complaints about performance issues and bugs in our platform were going up. This is not the vision that we have for our product, and it was an important wake-up call for us. We know that we can create a seamless and efficient experience, one with enjoyable workflows and minimal obstacles, but we had to get an understanding of exactly what was going wrong, which ended up being not an easy task until we had the help of Pendo. Traditionally, gathering this data required technical expertise or time-consuming back and forth with our engineering partners. This is far from ideal for busy product managers and engineers alike, and we knew that we needed a quicker, more efficient way to diagnose and address these issues, one that empowered us to identify them and resolve them without pulling too much time or too many resources away from innovation. Consider again my experience at that hotel. I guarantee that vending machine is not a cash cow for that company, but it is part of the overall experience. Had I been given an error message that made sense, that told me what I could do to get those donuts I so desperately desired, maybe, just maybe, I would have still stuck with that hotel. And that is what impacts the bottom line. So there are clear ways that performance issues and errors are problematic in a platform, but let's look specifically at how they can threaten success. These types of issues can sabotage growth. So new users encountering issues and poor experiences are quick to leave our products. For example, for us, if a user can't build a campaign in our platform and they can't find a good workaround, they're likely to go and take that to a competitor, which of course means the campaign won't run with us, and that's revenue we're not going to see. These issues can erode the stickiness of your product. So even if a product isn't perfect, users will tend to stay if it usually works smoothly and it provides an enjoyable experience. But when their frustrations start to mount, they start to look for alternatives, whether that's workarounds in your product or taking their business to one of your competitors. And finally, issues can distract from the really impressive stuff that we're all doing. So when users are constantly dealing with basic issues in your platform, they're less likely to notice or even care about the new stuff that you're building. They just want the platform to work. These challenges made it clear that we had to act at Yahoo and that we had to act quickly. So before diving into exactly how we addressed these problems, I do want to provide some context about our platform that'll be helpful for the rest of the session. As I alluded to, I work on a demand-side platform, or a DSP, which in simple terms, it helps companies buy their ads online more efficiently. So rather than an advertiser going out to individual websites buying one ad at a time, they simply put in their budget and their goals in our platform, and then the DSP does the work for them. It goes out, finds the best ad placements to purchase at the right time, and to ensure that we meet and exceed our advertisers' goals. It's a complex system that involves human decision-making at a number of steps along the way. Our platform is web-based, and a high-level understanding of its complexity is key to grasping why performance issues and errors can be so detrimental to our bottom line. Describing all the functions of a DSP, though, not the point of today's conversation and could honestly take us all day. But I do want to highlight some of the most important workflows and functions it has that'll be helpful for the rest of this session. Perhaps the most critical activity that takes place in our platform is the execution and management of campaigns. So campaigns get advertisements out into digital spaces and in front of users. They're how advertisers reach their goals and target audiences, and ultimately are a key driver of how we earn revenue. Advertisers, of course, care who sees their advertisements as well as where their advertisements are run. Users have access to a number of tools within our platform to craft the perfect audience and then reach that audience through premium inventory options. And the last area I'll mention is the advertisements themselves, also known as creatives. Advertisers bring their creatives to life within our platform, whether by uploading existing creatives or by working with us to build them from the ground up. So what does this all look like in practice? And I know every single person here is painfully aware of what advertisements are, so I won't make this a 101 on that, but I do want to highlight some of the different types of clients that might use our platform and how. So for example, a retailer might have a sale going on in a specific part of the country and they want to use our platform to target users in those geolocations. Or a new show's coming out and a streaming service wants to drum up excitement by delivering ads to users across different time zones. Or take the direct-to-consumer company that gains valuable insights about their customers using our platform and then targets campaigns to related audiences in order to increase their ROI. There's no shortage of ways that a DSP can be used to reach and beat an advertiser's goals, but it's important to acknowledge that when our platform experiences issues, that directly impacts our clients. They don't get the time back if they can't run campaigns, and that's a missed opportunity for them because they don't reach their target audience. Therefore, it's critical that we pay close attention to not only our users' experiences, but our clients' experiences as well. Okay, enough about DSPs. I promise the rest of these steps are going to be fairly platform agnostic, and you'll all have something you can take back and use at your own companies. So let's go back to the challenges. Recall that we saw our DSP UI scores going down and complaints about performance issues and bugs on the rise. We certainly don't want our platform creating friction for our users. What we want is to craft a great experience for them and one that helps them get their tasks done quickly and easily. But we can't get there without understanding the full scope of the problems that we were experiencing. To help us get at the root, we created a simple framework, not to solve the problem once, but to continuously detect and minimize these types of issues going forward. Our approach is iterative and it involves 3 simple steps. So first, we quantify the problem because we want to understand the full scope of what's going on. Then we plan and execute targeted improvements, and we follow up by measuring, modifying, and repeating. That way we ensure there's ongoing progress. This framework has been central to our strategy, and it enables us to keep improving without losing momentum. So as I mentioned, the first step is quantifying the scope of the problem. Historically, this required navigating engineering support, which involved a lot of back and forth between Slack messages, dumping data into spreadsheets, and building complex dashboards. It was clear that we needed a more efficient path and one that we could empower our product managers to own from the ground up. By this point, I had become a bit of a Pendo power user, and I realized that track events could be the missing link to what we needed, as that functionality provides additional data for us about our platform in Pendo. It has the added benefit, because it's in Pendo, of democratizing access to that data. So all product managers could get to it, they could see it, they could use it to make decisions, but also anyone who had access to our Pendo instance could do the same. I worked with engineering to implement 2 track events, which I'll detail shortly. Once live, those track events helped us get additional data that revealed 2 challenges that we wanted to address. The first challenge centers around performance. We found that we had users that were experiencing slower than acceptable load times within the DSP. We want our users to be able to complete their tasks quickly and not be bogged down waiting for pages to load. The second challenge focused on the various errors that users receive in our platform. We want to ensure that our users are only getting the necessary errors and that those errors tell them what went wrong, as well as what they can do and what next steps they can take to get past those errors. I'll walk through each of these challenges using the framework that I mentioned previously, and then I'll illustrate exactly how Pendo helped us arrive at our solutions to these problems much, much faster. Let's start with performance. So this first track event is primarily used for performance, though it's also a placeholder for any other global properties we want to pass back into Pendo. And that's because we've placed this track event on every page of our platform. This captures crucial data, such as the current path, so where's the user at right now in our system, the previous path, where's the user coming from. This helps us understand if there's any performance issues that could be related to navigation. And then, of course, total page load time. So how long is a user sitting and waiting on that page before they can actually use it? These metrics give us a detailed view of where performance issues are occurring in our platform, which allows us to target our improvements more effectively. So knowing that we won't be able to improve every page in the DSP right away, we wanted to focus on what would most likely be the most impactful for our users in terms of where they spend their time. So while this track event was collecting data for us, I used the Pages section of Pendo to get a quick snapshot of the top 20 pages where our users were spending their time the most. For each page, we used Data Explorer to see what the load times looked like. And to make that reporting and visualization more digestible, we grouped our load times into various buckets. So 1 to 3 seconds of loading, 3 to 5 seconds, etc. Then, as a team, we decided that any load time greater than 5 seconds is generally too long for our users. So we looked at each page's report that we pulled to narrow our list of the original 20 pages down to our top 10 pages that had the most load times over 5 seconds. Put another way, our top 10 slowest pages. This list that we had, along with each report, painted a clear picture of performance on those pages and made it easy for us to prioritize with engineering on where we should start. So we now had a starting point, and the engineers that we're working with set out to improve each of those pages. So one of the great things about this approach, which is probably no surprise to anyone here, is that it's incredibly easy to track. Plus, we're able to do that without pulling engineering away from resolving the problems themselves. As engineers implemented improvements for each page, we were able to measure them in a very simple way. Trend lines in the reports that we pulled revealed that the work we were doing was having the impact we wanted. We saw occurrences of 5-second load times start to drop off, and then an increase in the occurrences for shorter load times. We iterated this process over and over for each page and continued to monitor these changes in performance. And we ultimately watched the numbers for our top 10 slowest pages start to trend into more acceptable frames. Okay, so tracking performance may seem pretty straightforward, or maybe some of you are like, oh, that's tough. But let's move on to errors here and get the step-by-step for how we address those. So the next track event that we implemented is focused solely on errors, and it fires any time an error is issued in our platform. Of course, makes this data easily accessible within Pendo. The properties that we defined for this track event are the error type, so whether the error is happening in the UI or the API, the source of that error, so how are users experiencing the error? Is it a banner message? Is it an inline error? Or like this screen here, is it an icon that's surfacing the error to them? And then of course, we surface the error message, or we pass that back. And that gives us really valuable information about what our users are seeing. Do the errors seem like they're back-end errors? Do they seem like users might be confused with a workflow? A lot of stuff, a lot of information we can get from what just the error messages alone. We're also tracking the current path and the previous path because that allows us to pinpoint exactly where the errors are occurring in our platform. When data from this track event started coming back into Pendo and we were looking at it, we could see and quantify exactly what our users had been telling us about our platform. But there was still work to be done in order to get this data into an actionable state for our engineering teams. So this track event provided so much data that the most pressing challenge for us at the beginning was deciding where to begin. Should we start by looking at UI errors or the API errors, or should we examine how users are receiving errors within the platform? Or what about looking at the error messages themselves, because those are clearly important? Ultimately, we decided to prioritize this similar to the previous challenge. That is, see where and what errors were occurring the most, and then start addressing them from the top down. Along with prioritization, and as with the previous challenge that we had, we'd need to partner closely with engineering to further identify and address these errors. So therefore, the goal of this process was to extract the right data from Pendo in order to be the most helpful for our engineers in terms of troubleshooting and fixing these issues. And as product managers would ultimately be responsible for this data, we wanted to ensure that the process was as simple and as logical as possible. Our process starts with looking at errors broadly across the platform and then honing in on specific details to really get to the bottom of what those errors are telling us. Let's take a look at each step. So first, we want to understand the errors overall, and for that, we created a global errors report. This report, the benefit of this report is that it gives us a quick view of every error that's happening in our system and neatly organizes it so we see just the top 10 errors. Because if you look at every error in a system, it could get quite overwhelming pretty quickly. The benefit of this, the list that we make here is a simple list in Data Explorer. We group it by the error message that's received as well as the current path or where that user is, so by the page that that error is occurring on. For a product manager that's coming into this graph and looking at it, they'll see if any of those top 10 errors are occurring on pages that are within their area of ownership. And if so, then they'll move on to get more information about that error and ultimately pass it along to engineering. To dig in deeper, this next step looks at the specific error or errors that are happening on a given page. In this report, we also include visitor details, as that gives us a good inclination of the scope of the problem that's being experienced or problems. To make this step easier to replicate, we simply make a single base report, and then product managers can go in and make a copy of this and just change the filters as needed to quickly get the data that they need. This view helps answer a few key questions. First, how many users are experiencing the issue? Is it just a few of them, or is it a broad swath of them? And similarly, is it just a few accounts, or is it a lot of accounts? Also, what can we tell about the error message itself? As I mentioned before, we can tell things like, is it a back-end error? Does it seem like users are confused? Is it just an unclear message? For example, I can glean 3 issues from this graph that I would want to explore further. The first one is the sheer number of errors. The numbers might be really small on the bottom, but there are hundreds happening on this page. And depending on the time frame of this report, so if it's just last 24 hours or the last 7 days, this could indicate that there's a problem with the page overall that we'd want to investigate. If I look at the errors at the top, they all say NA. And if that's an error message that we're giving our users, it's just not helpful. It doesn't tell them anything about what happened, and it certainly doesn't give them next steps on and how they can get past that error. And the third thing I'd look at is all the error messages on the bottom, and apologies if they're very small, but they all say the same thing. And what it might indicate to me is that there's something wrong with the workflow that user is experiencing that's leading them to get that error. For example, maybe they're clicking on something they don't have access to and they're getting an error for it. A simple fix might be don't let them click on stuff that they don't have access to. With all this information, there's just one more step we take in order to get the data into the right format for our engineering partners. Getting error occurrences narrowed down to a specific time frame turned out to be the most helpful data that we could provide to engineers, as this allows them to pinpoint that error within our own internal systems, and those systems provide them with deeper data about troubleshooting and fixing the errors that we're encountering. To get timestamps in Pendo, and you probably guessed where I'm going with this, we use Data Explorer. We filter a report for a specific error message that's received, and then we use a segment in Pendo with one user in it that received that error to see what days they were getting that error. From here, we change the date range to be that single day that the user, or at least one of the single days that the user experienced the error, and the resulting timeline is broken out by hour, which gives us a clear view of the hour or the range of hours that that user experienced the error. This provides us with the time frame we need to pass along to engineering. So the only piece left here is to package it up into a ticket and then track that ticket to completion. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, Cameron, this seems a bit complicated, maybe you're partially correct. However, I will say most of the complexity here comes from stepping through each report to get the different levels of data that you might need. In practice, though, we can get the data in roughly 2 steps. We create one report to find an error that's being received by users, and we narrow it down to a specific day that they're receiving that error. Then we use a second report to, I gave you a sneak peek. Then we use a second report to narrow down that error to a time frame and pass that along to engineering. And then to make this process more easily replicable, we simply create copies of the same base report and adjust the filters as needed. As each ticket's created, we track the progress through completion, and then we monitor our trend charts, just like we did in the last challenge. And let me tell you, it's extremely satisfying to see what used to be a lot of errors happening at once go to effectively 0. Everyone loves that. So now you've seen the 2 challenges and how we address them. How do we do overall? I am super performance and errors. On the performance front, we were able to improve the load times of our top 10 pages by 40 to 80%, which is a huge about how snappy our platform felt. And for anyone that works on a B2B product, you know how challenging it can be to get unsolicited positive feedback about your product. On the error front, we've made significant progress rolling out this process to a group of product managers. We're actively working with engineers to continue resolving more and more errors. And while this is an ongoing effort, we're already seeing positive changes in the sentiment and the experience of our users. And of course, this is a journey and not a destination. The value in this process lies in the continuous improvement that this framework enables. Pendo's track events and simple reporting made it possible for us to get to work on these challenges much, much faster. By continuously tracking a wealth of data about performance and errors, we could drastically reduce the time that we spend going back and forth between Slack and spreadsheets and dashboards. Now we create 1, maybe 2 reports in order to get the data that we need, and we attach that data to a ticket and pass along to engineering for prioritization. The back and forth, greatly reduced. This equates to more time for us to spend on the good stuff, like continuing to make our platform incredibly user-friendly. No effort, though, is without its challenges, of course, and I want to highlight a few that we experienced as well as what we did to overcome them. Cardinality issues arose after our track events had some time to collect data, which caused some challenges with how we could run reporting. For example, we could no longer report on current path because we were sending more than 10,000 unique URL values back to Pendo because of an ID that we had in the URL. After we fixed that on our end, we needed to create a new property in our track event in order to unblock us from reporting. So therefore, I recommend resolving any cardinality issues before you implement track events. So especially if you're using, you're going to track URLs. Time constraints are an ongoing challenge for busy product managers and engineers. Even though there's tons and tons of interest in improving the performance and reducing errors in our platform, we're all just strapped for time. So to overcome this, we made sure that the process was as simple as possible. For example, a PM that knows that we have these track events implemented in the data that's coming into our platform can easily go and pull a report, create a ticket, and pass along to engineering very, very quickly. Resourcing is a challenge that I'm sure is familiar to all of us in some shape or form. If we had unlimited time and unlimited resources, we could solve every single problem in our platform and it would run perfectly. But that is simply not the reality. So while I don't control resourcing, I can influence the priority of projects that I feel are highly impactful. Improving performance issues and error handling directly impacts how useful our product is. And in a hyper-competitive space, you can lose on ease of use. These challenges are ongoing, but we built a foundation to address them and continuously improve on them. So between performance issues and plenty of errors, we were faced with a hefty challenge at Yahoo. Using Pendo track events allowed us to get a quick and full scope and a quick handle on the full scope of the problem, as well as provide ways for us to measure the impact we were having when we developed fixes to the problems we discovered. We continue to follow our framework, which is to quantify the problem to understand its scope, plan out, execute, and measure targeted improvements, and then measure and adjust as needed over time to ensure ongoing progress. This is all in service of remaining focused on removing pain points and delivering the best possible experience for our users and our platform. I want you all to imagine a world where your product is known for its seamless performance and where frequent and poor errors are a thing of the past. That's the future that we're working toward at Yahoo, and it's completely within your reach. Thank you all so much. Oh, thank you. I'm ready for some questions.
How awesome was that? Do you guys love it? We've got some time for some questions. What questions do you have for our wonderful speaker? Don't be shy.
Oh, yeah. It was that good.
Yeah, you answered literally every question that they had.
I try.
I know somebody's got one somewhere. You're just being shy. I get it.
Is anyone
Oh,
confused?
there's one back there. Oh, there's another one. Amazing.
I've got a quick. Oh, is that me? Yeah, that is me. I've got a quick question. Could you just quickly explain the cardinality issue you had?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, could you say that again?
Could you just re-explain the cardinality issue you had?
Yeah. So cardinality occurs when you send too many unique values back into Pendo. So for us, the way our URL paths work is we have a lot of IDs. So you have like a campaign ID or a line ID. But we have, as you can imagine, like a unique ID, and we have thousands and thousands of them. It essentially overwhelms the system with too much data and makes reporting difficult. So in Pendo, and I understand this limitation, when you reach more than 10,000 unique values, you won't be able to actually pull a report to get a breakout. And so the way we resolve that is instead of sending IDs, we basically send a placeholder that just says ID. And so that makes one value for every time we send in that path, which is really all we need. We don't care about a specific error for a specific ID. We want to know about that page in general.
That makes sense, thanks. And then the other question is, I think your use case is strictly web, is that right, not mobile?
Yeah, we're strictly web. Yep.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Yeah.
Great questions. I know we had one over here.
Thanks. Is this on? Thanks for presentation. Great job. Yes, in all seriousness, I am the account manager for Yahoo, so Cameron is just a great guy to work with and whatnot. Were there any outcomes? You know, we talk about outcomes here at Pendo. Any outcomes that you've been able to quantify based on your usage of Pendo over the years, whether it's saving money, making money, saving time, or even reducing risk?
Or all of those.
Or all of those,
Yeah, all of them.
yes.
So my role, as like I mentioned, strictly like ease of use. So other PMs definitely have said, I think time equals money. So of course, what we focus on, or at least in my experience, is really how can we save our users time and just improve their experiences. The errors, I think, is a really good example. We think about errors. You will have, one train of thought is like, okay, an error that occurs will stop a user from doing something, or the platform breaks completely. But there are a lot of micro errors that users run into that cause them to take more time to finish whatever it is they're trying to do. And so by freeing up and addressing those and actually just getting visibility into it, it allows them to get through their workflows faster, meaning they can run campaigns more frequently. They can run them more easily, and they'll run more with us. And so that's an increase, in money. I also think I'm a firm believer in the stickiness of a product based on how enjoyable it is to use. And if you make an experience for a user that they'll come back to and use, they're less likely to leave your platform, and that's money we get to keep, right? And I think Pendo really does help us get visibility into what's impacting our users so that we can make that experience more enjoyable for them.
Great question. Thank you so much. Another one over here.
Was Pendo your only tool used to collect metrics, or were there any others? And I'm curious specifically, did you ever look at capturing the core web vitals to understand the tech fatigue that your users were experiencing?
With the core what?
The core web vitals?
Like with Google Analytics?
Yeah, it's a Google framework, so.
So I think we had used Google Analytics in the past. At some point, I think before I became a product manager, they switched over to really using internal tools like Splunk, and then a homegrown kind of analytics tracking. And that's kind of why I mentioned the time-consuming part for product managers was that I had to reach out to an engineer and ask them to build a special dashboard or a query for me because my background isn't overly technical. And so that distracts them and pulls them away from their work to do that. And so when we had Pendo, we were originally just using it, not just using it, using it for tracking clicks. And as I learned more about track events, it just seemed like a no-brainer for us getting that additional information via the JavaScript snippet to understand those metrics and let product managers own and see it more easily without engineers having to be bothered. Engineers still see that data, but we can prioritize it better for them based on what's the most painful for our users.
Great question. I think I saw another one down here. Maybe? Yep, right there.
So I have a question about the error tracking. So I get that you mentioned banners and stuff as a point that you're tracking and getting that information back from. For you guys, I don't know if you experience this, but is it a known product limitation that if it's a text return that's not a specific event, you're not able to track it? I don't know. I'm guessing.
Yeah, so both,
Okay.
all of the above. So we do have events that come through that have not been identified or caught by engineering or product through testing with our users. Those inevitably come up as system errors that don't make any sense to users. And the beauty of this type of tracking is we can see that, and that's one of the types of errors that we want to address right away. First, to understand, what caused that error, and if it's a legitimate error, something the user did that they shouldn't have been able to do, or what have you, we want to make sure we go back and log that error correctly and change the message so that a user knows what happened and how they can get past it. And so we quantify those a lot because we will see this is the error message that doesn't make sense. It occurred 73 times for user 123. And that's a clear problem for us that we want to address. But we actually will see any time an error is thrown, the track event will fire. So we get both the stuff that we've defined and then the stuff that we missed.
Okay. Great question. Thank you so much. We've got time for probably about another one or two questions. You guys got them? Oh, over there. Perfect.
Hello? Okay, there you go. Thanks again for your presentation. The company that I work for is actually, we face similar issues. We call it Project Paper Cuts, because it's that's why a million paper cuts. When I joined the company, I realized that we didn't really have any benchmarks relating to baseline feedback and NPS score relating to UI. So question about how you measure your, I think you called it DPS UI score?
How did you ask how we measure the UI score? Okay.
Yeah.
So we have basically an ad satisfaction survey that goes out twice a year. And in that, we have a bunch of questions related to different parts of our UI. One of them being my area of ownership, which is campaign management. And so just over the years, we have tracked that score. And we noticed, I would say, it was a year and a half ago, is when that score started to go down. Another as part of that surveying that we get back, we also get verbatim feedback that tells us specifically what users are having a problem with. And so it was clear at that point we had tons and tons of users that were saying, this platform is super slow, like just fix that and stop releasing new features, which is like a painful thing to hear as a product manager, but I personally love it because that's a problem that we get to fix. And so by using that like surveying and then the qualitative feedback that was coming back, we saw that we had an issue that we wanted to address. And then we've had, kind of as I mentioned, we've seen those scores rebound after doing this feature, among some other stuff, but like this, like the performance, now users just complain about the normal stuff. They don't have to worry about slow pages anymore.
Awesome. We implemented something recently similar to that as well, where we've been using Pendo to like launch surveys. We revamped our UI, and then periodically we're releasing these surveys where it's like a couple of questions like, oh, how would you rate your experience, ease of use, and X, Y, Z, and then the last question is like any other feedback that you have, and that's all qualitative. So pretty aligned with what you guys have done. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I love that. I love the paper cuts analogy too. That's great.
I love that, and not to tease too early, but Pendo is going to be exploring a lot more types of surveys coming up. So,
All right.
last question. Got time for one more? Oh, right there. Cool.
A great talk. Does your platform integrate to external sites? So if a user's on DSP, are they taken anywhere else? Can they be?
No, generally everything they need to do, they can do within our platform in general. We do have users that work with like agencies, of course, and other platforms where they maybe create different tags and import them into our platform, but generally it's a self-sufficient ecosystem.
Okay. Cool. That was
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's give Cameron a round of applause. What a great presentation. Thank you so much.